They say love can build a person up, but it can also tear them down in ways they never recover from. And if you look deep enough into the story of D'Angelo and Angie Stone, you'll see a love that started with music, but ended in silence, a silence so heavy, it became louder than any song he ever wrote. Because behind the soul, behind the genius, and behind those haunting lyrics, there was a young man who once believed love would save him, only to find out it could also destroy him. This is the story of how one of music's brightest stars was molded, guided, and broken by the woman who once said she loved him. But here's the twist: sometimes, the people who help us find our voice are the same ones who take it away. It all started long before the world knew his name. Michael Eugene Archer, better known as D'Angelo, wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing a feeling. Growing up in Richmond, Virginia, the church was his first stage. The piano was his first love. And the gospel was his teacher. People around him always said his gift was divine, that he was meant to touch souls. But nobody could have imagined how quickly that gift would pull him into a world that wasn't ready for his innocence. By the late 1990s, D'Angelo was the face of something new, the neo-soul movement. He wasn't just another singer, he was the sound of a generation. Brown sugar turned him into a phenomenon overnight, that rich, smooth voice, that quiet confidence, that old soul trapped in a young body. And while women across the world were falling in love with him, D'Angelo himself was falling under the spell of someone else, Angie Stone. Now, Angie wasn't just another name in the industry. She was already respected, a powerhouse with years of experience, a mother, and a woman who had already survived the ups and downs of fame. She met D'Angelo when he was still that shy 19-year-old with big dreams and no armor. And from the very beginning, she saw something in him, something she wanted to shape. Their connection was instant. She became his mentor, his collaborator, his inspiration. She helped him with his image, his confidence, his sound. Some even say she gave him his name D'Angelo, as if she was rewriting who he was meant to become. And for a while, it looked like love and destiny were working together. But what nobody expected was how easily love could turn into control. You see, Angie wasn't just guiding him, she was creating him. She told him he was beautiful, that he had to own his sexuality, that women would crave him. She taught him how to move, how to look, how to breathe confidence. And the shy boy from Virginia started to disappear, replaced by the man the industry wanted to see. But underneath that new image, there was confusion, because while the world saw power in seduction, D'Angelo was still just trying to understand who he was. The age difference didn't help. She was 32. He was 19. That's more than just years, that's a lifetime of experience separating two people trying to love each other in an industry that devours the weak. And while some people brushed it off as just love, others could see it, the imbalance. He was still learning. She was leading. And that kind of dynamic always comes with a price. As D'Angelo's fame grew, so did the cracks in their relationship. He was becoming the sex symbol of the decade, the face on every poster, the fantasy of millions. But that image, the one built to sell records, started to suffocate him. Because behind every seductive photo shoot, behind every lyric dripping with desire, was a young man who felt owned by an image he didn't create. And that's where the pain started. Friends say D'Angelo began pulling away, wanting to make music without Angie's shadow. But Angie wasn't ready to let go. She had been there from the beginning. She believed she made him who he was, and she wanted the world to remember that. She talked about him in interviews, wrote songs that hinted at their history, and even years after they split, she couldn't stop bringing him up. But what most people don't know is that D'Angelo's silence after their breakup wasn't about bitterness. It was about survival. He had been broken down by fame, by pressure, and by the emotional weight of a relationship that blurred the line between love and control. And while Angie kept speaking, D'Angelo went quiet, retreating into himself, into the shadows, into the kind of pain only artists truly understand. It's easy for outsiders to romanticize what they had: two artists, deeply connected, making timeless music together. But when you strip away the melodies, what's left is a story about power, manipulation, and the cost of being molded by someone who says they love you. D'Angelo once said in an old interview that fame made him feel like an object, like he was trapped in a version of himself the world demanded. And when you think about who created that version, who told him to embrace that image, who crafted that sexy persona, the answer becomes complicated. Because Angie did it out of love, but also out of control. She wanted to see him shine, but maybe she wanted him to shine in her light, not his own. The world remembers D'Angelo's untitled, "How Does It Feel?" music video, that slow, intimate shot of him standing shirtless, staring into the camera. It became one of the most talked about moments in music history. But behind the camera, D'Angelo was struggling. He later admitted that he felt violated by the fame that video brought him. Everywhere he went, people treated him like a body, not an artist. He didn't want to be the sex symbol, he wanted to be respected for his art. And when that didn't happen, he started to spiral. The pressure became unbearable. He gained weight, stopped performing, and disappeared from the spotlight. Rumors started to swirl: drug use, depression, isolation. But behind all of it was something more complex: the emotional wreckage left behind from being shaped by someone else's vision of love. Angie, on the other hand, seemed to move forward, at least publicly. She spoke about their love, defended it, and blamed outsiders for judging her. She said people hated their relationship because she was a dark-skinned, plus-size woman who dared to love a young, handsome sex symbol. And yes, that kind of prejudice was real. The world did judge her harshly. But it also made it easier for her to ignore the deeper issue: the fact that D'Angelo wasn't just her partner. He was her student. Her project. And that imbalance, emotional, creative, and personal, left scars on both of them. Years later, D'Angelo would return to music, but not as the same man. His voice had aged, deepened, it carried pain, reflection, and truth. When he finally dropped Black Messiah, it wasn't just an album. It was a confession. Every lyric sounded like a man who had been through something he still couldn't fully say out loud. Some fans say that album was his way of reclaiming himself, of breaking free from everything that had once controlled him. And in a way, it was. Because silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it means healing. Sometimes, it's the only way to take your power back. For D'Angelo, speaking publicly about Angie wasn't worth reopening old wounds. He didn't need to explain the pain, he turned it into music. And maybe that was his message all along. Because love, in its purest form, should build you, not break you. And no matter how much history or chemistry two people share, when power becomes part of the equation, love starts to lose its meaning. Looking back, it's hard to tell where their story ends and where the legend begins. To this day, Angie still talks about their connection. She's called him the love of her life, said their bond was deeper than most could understand. But D'Angelo's silence says just as much as her words. He doesn't deny the past. He just refuses to let it define him anymore. Because sometimes, the loudest message you can send to someone who once controlled your story is peace. That silence? That's his final word. Not a song, not an interview, just the quiet strength of a man who finally learned that love and freedom should never come at the cost of your soul. And that's the part people miss when they talk about D'Angelo and Angie Stone. Yes, their love was real. Yes, it created magic. But it also came with lessons, painful, necessary lessons about power, fame, and identity. In the end, D'Angelo found his peace not in revenge, but in reflection. He stepped away from the noise, the headlines, the drama, and returned to what he always loved: music that comes from the heart. Because while Angie's story may live on through her words, D'Angelo's legacy lives in the silence between his notes, in the way his songs still make people feel, decades later. And maybe that's what true healing sounds like. Not an apology. Not a confession. But growth. Quiet, steady growth. So if there was ever a message left between them, it wasn't written in text or spoken in anger. It was in the space between two people who once loved each other deeply, but had to learn that love alone isn't enough when one person holds all the power. It was D'Angelo's way of saying, "I forgive you. But I also forgive myself." And that might be the most powerful message of all.